My name is Sigri Sunna Reynisdo, but you can call me Sigga Sunna, like my friends do. I am many things, and I wear many different hats. And I just understood that that's something that you've been talking about as well here. That's something you want to be able to kind of get out of being boxed in one job or like one discipline. And I relate to that a lot. So I hear I have some puppetry family here. Who is a puppeteer? Yes, okay. So I also trained in puppetry, and that's very much kind of still, even though I'm not working very much with puppetry today, I always think of a good friend of mine called Renee Baker. She's an English puppeteer, and she said this beautiful sentence. She said, like, I always say that first and foremost, I am a puppeteer because it affects everything I do. Even though you don't see puppets, yes. It means that you see soul in that objects. It means that you believe in the power of metamorphosis. And I thought it was so great. And I thought it was very liberating to be like, okay, I am still a puppeteer, even though nobody sees a puppet next to me, But also, I have a diploma in classical music. I studied comparative literature and textiles and theater. So both here in Iceland and abroad. I'm not going to bore you with, I just threw it up here. So I've been working in theater as a set and costume designer, like Ilmur, who was here before. But I've also created radio programs. I'm looking at remembering different things that I've done. I've curated art festivals, and it's a little bit of a good moment for me. It's the first time that I say it like this because a few years back I thought it was a bit awkward or like almost embarrassing to talk about how many different things I've been doing because I was afraid that it would look chaotic, and that people would be like, oh, you're always thinking, what do people think of me? But nobody really cares and no one is thinking anything of you. But this is what I was thinking, like, oh, I have to have a clear line. But today, when I look back, I am so happy about, you can see when you look back, like, oh yeah, okay, I did this and then I had to turn here, so I would be able to come here, but you couldn't see it at the time, And I think for me, it's been most important to just be like, okay, am I excited doing this now? Then I do it. And then I take stock, in a few years, do I still want to be doing this? If not, it's fine. Because it's, so in my school, when I graduated as a puppetry and performance artist, we were asked to make a 5-year plan. And I was like, oh, fantastic to make a 5-year plan. And I really, made an effort to do a good 5-year plan. And the good thing about making 5-year plans is you think ahead and you might dare to dream of things that might come true. But the problem about making these 5-year plans is that life may surprise you and you cannot be limited by this 5-year plan. And this happened to me. So I had been, I was like, okay, I do this and then I go into this and, I had this very laid out and then life surprised me. I was asked to be a set designer for a project, and I tried very much to say no. And I tried very much to say, oh, there are so many other people you should ask instead. And they kept saying, no, we really want you to be the set designer for this project. And when the set arrived on stage, I had 2 very strong feelings. The first feeling was, oh my God, this is the most satisfying moment I've had in my professional career in theater. I love this. This is what I want to do. And the next feeling was, shit. Because this was not on the 5-year plan. It was totally not on the 5-year plan. And I was, so I just had these 2 big feelings, amazing, shit, and what do I do with it? And I made a deal with myself because I think it's especially important when you're an artist and a freelancer to treat yourself as your boss and your employee, and you have to be good at both, So I sat down with myself, and I told the boss, me, I said, okay, I'm going to continue doing this for as long as I feel like it. It's, I love it now. I don't know where it's going to take me. I'm going to say yes to projects that come to me. But if I change my mind, I will change my mind. And that has happened later. So, which we will come back to later. But yeah, so my point is, it's wonderful to be able to make plans. It's wonderful to be able to change plans. And I hope you take that with you. But when I look back, like I said, when I look at this weird route that seemed crazy at the time, I can see that the red thread in my work is to initiate interdisciplinary work. Are you familiar with the word interdisciplinary? Yeah. Okay, because I was not a few years ago. So yeah, that's like, I believe in the magic of when you put different people with different brains and different skill sets in one room and have them work together on a mutual project where they all meet. So this is like what I see now. This is what excites me. And it doesn't really matter to me anymore what the medium is. It can't be theater. It can't be product design. It can't be a concert. I don't care anymore, but this is what gets me going. And if there's anything I would hope to inspire you with today is a secret that I want to share with you, which is the best way if you want to get a new collaborator. It could be a biologist, it could be a space engineer, it could be, a musician. The best way to get them to collaborate is to knock on their door. And they will, in 90% of the cases, say yes, please. And I think it's just someone had to say this to me for me to understand it, and I have experience in this now, that you imagine that someone, I will take an example of, there was a butterfly researcher in Harvard University, and I was like, oh my God, they're not gonna answer our emails. But they did, and they came to Iceland, and they worked on a project with us. So it's just like, you will not get these collaborators if you don't knock on their door. And I feel like it's a trick that we learn here in Iceland, especially maybe my generation. It's sadly not so much anymore, but as kids, you would just go to any house where you knew, okay, there's a kid in there, I've seen him. I will knock on the door and say, do you want to come out and play? And they most often say, yes, I want to come out and play. And in the unlikely event that they don't, you just go to the next door. And I just feel that this still applies. Most people want to come out and play with you. And they think what you are doing is exciting. Okay. Another thing that I want to emphasize today is time, because I feel like I am taking a little break from theater. I saw people around me dropping like flies because everyone's very tired and exhausted. And I think there's something that needs to change in how we think about time when we're working in theater. Because basically, am I always standing in the middle of, no, okay, you tell me if you can't see the slides. So for me, I realized there's two types of time that I've experienced as an artist. So I'm talking about like how you experience time in a project, working on a project. There's long time, it's like this, it's linear, it's horizontal, and that kind of time makes you run, and you get tired and you wear yourself down. And the other kind of time is deep time. And as I was doing, so these two arrows are exactly the same size, they're as long, but doesn't this one feel longer? Yes. I was surprised when I did this on the computer. I was like, this does feel longer. Visually and also physically, it feels better and longer. So I will come back to this, but this is just a concept that I've been thinking about a lot, and it means rather than feeling that you're on a treadmill and that you have to chase time frames that other people give you for projects, especially the kind of job that I do, I need different time to be able to think and come back to things. And I think this is just like it seems to be like a big moment in the world, especially post-COVID. Like we need to think about how we function as artists and designers and how we don't just like wear ourselves out. Okay, So now, before our break, I'm going to talk about theater, my work in theater, relating to all of this. So I want you to imagine like two imaginary hats. I'm going to be talking before the break with the hat of a theater person, then I will take that hat off, and after the break, I will be an artistic director of a design company. Okay, are you with me on that? Okay, so I'm putting on the imaginary hat of the theater person, of the puppeteer and designer that I used to be and still am. So Vavavoom is a visual theater company that I founded with a dear friend of mine called Sara Marti, which Doro also knows. And we were studying together in Central School of Speech and Drama in London. And we really felt the same kind of hunger for creating visual theater. And we were really chasing out shows in London where, you know, it's this wonderful moment where you're like, I kind of know what I want to do. I can't really do it yet, but you try. And there was a teacher who said, like, you just have to be patient. Like, for the first show, you will make 10 minutes that you're happy with. With the next show, they might be 20, and then you just continue. And we had that kind of journey together. And we agreed on bringing people from different disciplines into this theater company. So we had filmmakers and dancers, puppeteers, actually a Bulgarian puppeteer called Irena Stratieva. Do you know her? No. So it was both like across disciplines, but also across countries. We had the French filmmaker people just kind of meeting to work together. So this is me and Sara. And we were also branding, I think, is a bit of a boring word, but just like visual identity mattered a lot to us, and it still does to me. And I think that's something everyone should be really thinking about in this day and age, because so often people will see photos of your work online, but they won't really see your performance, which is sad, or your product that you design. But it's just something to keep in mind, to invest in those, like in the visual identity of whatever you want to be doing. So the first touring show that we did, and thinking about it, the only puppetry show after training as a puppeteer that I did was called Breaking News, and it premiered here in the National Theatre, and then it toured to Edinburgh Fringe Festival in Summerhall Theatre the following year. And it was a devised theatre piece about our relationship with the news. And it was kind of, the idea came to me after the crash, the economical crash here, because it was a really weird situation where everyone was, I found this good quote that I really like, people don't actually read newspapers, they step into them every morning like a hot bath. And that was really the feeling. Everyone was hungry for news, trying to understand what happened, but also everyone was just losing their mind because it's not healthy to just soak yourself in news. So this was kind of like a situation we wanted to comment on. And we used a lot of different styles of puppetry there, playing with scale and the material of paper, because we were dealing with newspapers primarily and seeing them as a creative medium. I don't want to dwell on that much more. I just felt like I needed to show you, especially because it had a Bulgarian puppeteer. But this was kind of like where my journey as a professional started with this show. But the next show that I want to talk more about with you, because it relates more to what I do today, was a show called White Slumber for Lepidopterists. And it all began with I often say it's the smallest yet biggest book I've ever read. And my husband, who's a music composer, he gave it to me and he said, can you read this book and can you check if you see something? Because when I read this book, I hear something. And I thought it was so beautiful, and it's very much about this that I'm talking about. Like, if you get people from different mediums, one might read a book and hear something, and another might read a book and see something. And that's exactly what happened with the two of us. And it's by this Canadian writer called Angela Rawlings. I'm going to pass it through because it is really interesting to see how her head as a poet works, also visually, how she puts words on a text. And it wasn't, it wasn't like clear immediately how on earth this book of poetry would become a piece of theater, and it took deep time. We had to workshop it many times, and we had to constantly bring in new people. And the kind of prehistory of this project is that she, being a poet, wanted to make a collaboration with her friend who was a visual artist. So it was again someone who works with text and someone who works with images. And at the time, when they created this book, that we then created a piece of theater, she was very much thinking about sleep, like the sleep cycles, you know, how you go into REM sleep, and the different stages of sleep. And he was researching the different stages of metamorphosis of butterflies. And because they wanted to work together, they were two solo artists who were kind of absolutely immersed in this research. And they found out, as often happens, as I said, when you put different heads in the same space, that this lined up perfectly. They started looking at how, for example, REM state is like the pupa state of butterflies. So they could find a pattern to mirror these two science fields as an art piece. And my head exploded so many times when I was doing research for this project, because this kind of project only happens in deep time. And you have to digest and you have to go back. And we did a lot of research with her, the poet, to understand where she was coming from. But then also when you're going this deep, I was like, I just really want to, rather than, because the wonderful thing about the internet is that everything is accessible. The difficult thing about the internet is that you just Google things, and you shouldn't just always Google things. You should go and find the people who know more than you do about something. And that's what this project taught me. So this is the picture from the piece that we created, and I want to show you this because we brought in a sleep research scientist on our team. We knocked on his door and he said, yes, absolutely, I want to come out and play with you. I am so excited to show you research about sleep in fish. And I said, oh my God, I'm so excited to hear everything you've been researching about sleep in fish. And this is what I'm talking about. Because when you're in that kind of, and I love that nerdy state, someone who is just, you know, do you know what happens in the brain of fish? No, I don't. Can you tell me everything about it? And this is what I thrive on. This is what gets me going in the morning. And this imagery is from this science. This is imagery that has been treated by video artists of the brain in the fish that he studied who were sleeping. And it was just so beautiful in a theater performance. And often I thought back and I was like, oh my God, if we wouldn't have had this deep time and we would have just Googled some rubbish imagery online, this kind of wouldn't have translated between these mediums. And it took time to come up with, you know, as theater artists, when you're doing an adaptation of a book to a theater, you know, it's a painful process and very often doesn't work, to be honest. And it was particularly challenging there because there was no story, there were no characters, and my friend, Sara Marti, a friend of our, and Dora, she said, you are just crazy. Like, I don't know what to do with this. But we found a way through research. And one of the things that helped, because we were analyzing voices of different science fields in this book. So you have the voice of, it's called lepidopterist. It took me like a few months of the project just to be able to say lepidopterist. That's a person who researches butterflies. so we had kind of that text around that science field, and then we had the sleep science text, and our job was to create bodies on stage that would deliver this text and give them backstories. And what was crucial for us as theater makers was this that I was telling you about a little bit earlier, was to bring in, to understand what is a lepidopterist. I've never met a lepidopterist. What do they do? What is their life like? And we met this wonderful lepidopterist, Melissa Whittaker, who has been, so she is a part of the Harvard, the Nabokov Institution at Harvard University. And we met a few different lepidopterists, and I think that's important also when you're going into a different field. You just know when you find your person. And it was very clear, like, she was our person. You just have this kind of click. And she became very much involved in the process. And yeah, she came here, she did workshops on how to pin butterflies. I even brought some butterflies.
Wow.
And this is, I also brought them because this is what I'm talking about. We don't want to only look at photos, we want to see the real things. And for us, like, so she brought cases of butterflies. And when you're in deep time and when you really start looking, you are kind of giving nourishment to yourself. And for our costume designers, for example, it was so important to be able to get access to these like really detailed photos of butterfly wings that inspired the textile in her clothes. And the same with the sleep scientist, like getting all of this imagery affects your choice of textiles on stage. It's just like, it makes you go under the surface, effectively. And yeah, so I just wanted to say, like, I often thought if in elementary school, Melissa Whittaker would have come in and told me about her work, I probably would be a biologist today, because it's so inspiring to, like, basically how she works was so inspiring to us, that she's like flying off to Cambodia or Uganda to catch this very specific butterfly. And all of a sudden, when you meet, when it's not just a science field that's not human, you know, when you meet the person that you relate to, it very much affected the character building of this lepidopterist. And the third element, I'm going to show you then bits from this performance, so you can see and hear what we did. But kind of the third element on stage was, so we had the dreamer. So it was a person who was being researched by the sleep scientist on stage. And we had the weaver, who was basically, you will see in the video, becomes like this, what is the word, metaphor for a butterfly, like goes through that cycle. It sounds very confusing when I'm saying it like this, but that's kind of also the beauty of this work. We, at so many points, were like, we don't really know what it is, but we like it, and we're gonna continue. So I'm gonna show you the video. And yes, just to give you some credits, I don't want to throw in like tons of Icelandic names that you will immediately forget, but I still want to say that, so this music is composed by Valgeir Sigurðsson, and you have, the credit list will come at the end, so you will see it then.
Starts itself, thinking as well. Start and repeat, start and repeat, start. peaks. There is a step, Piaggio, a step.
Seven neon, account for breath, slow, big sleep, slow, and slow, soft, mouth weak, hard spice, threads, muscle, in graduate or rest part, and partner lips.
Welcome to the Center for Sleep and Dream Studies. Come to the Center for Sleep and Dream Sleep and come to the Center for Sleep and Dream
Sections of ourselves we dissect in one. Slim sections of ourselves we dissect in one. Slim sections of ourselves. Let's short and free. Let's short and free. Let's short and free. We dissect in one. Slim sections of ourselves. Dissect.
Trip the wood, sailboat, hand over. Asphyxia. Is this what we hold? Ten. Is this what we are? Small, 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 silver-studded, small, mazarine, small, small, mazarine, small, silver.
Oh
So we dream the same. Do we dream the same? So we dream the same. Do we dream?
And it just came to me as we were watching this, that even when we were because we were talking about being boxed in, and does it matter what you are today? You know, what is your profession? What is your job title? Even when we were deciding, is this an opera or is it music theater? You find this everywhere. Everyone is struggling with these barriers that are put between. Oh, sorry. So we decided at the time to call this music theater, and it was for the simple reason because we had friends who had just wanted to make kind of experiments with the medium of opera, and all the focus went into, oh, but is it opera because they're using mics? And so it's just interesting to see how this kind of question can be so limiting, like what is the form? Okay, now I'm going to take off my imaginary theater hat. We're going to have coffee, and then I was wondering, so you just came straight back in here, right? You haven't seen anything else in... Yeah, because I was wondering if you want to come and see my favorite place downstairs, which is because if you like this, you will see much more. It's the Natural History Museum of Kópavogur. They have a beautiful exhibition downstairs. And I think it's just nice before we see more on screen that you just get to go down there and look, and then you will see more what I'm talking about when we're back. Yeah! They have live fish. I was telling, it's actually a nice story that I want to tell you since you were all here, because this is something that I discovered very recently and I think is really interesting. The biologists who work here, who are our collaborators, were telling me that you see how different size of the eyes are in the fish. And you see that it doesn't matter, it's not about the size of the fish. It's not like the biggest fish has the biggest eye. Right. It's because the lower you go into the ocean, the less light is there. Therefore, you need a bigger eye to catch as much light as possible. Makes sense. So exactly, once you know it, but I was just like, damn, what? And also the other thing that I thought was super interesting is just about, so I will tell you about basically a project where this is relevant. But I've been kind of looking at how humans and different animals see the world, because it's just very kind of nice to step out of your human body and be like, okay, there are so many things that we don't see, and there are things that others don't see that we see, etc. And what I discovered was that the color of this, so the red color, because you're like, you know, why are they so red? And it's actually the lower you go into the ocean, so the different colors, like the rays of the light, the red color can travel the shortest distance, which means that if you're in the color red, you're invisible. So, and when I talk to kids about this, we say like, you know, it's like Iron Man is red and Superman is red. So it's like having a superhero power if you're in like red color and you're deep.
Tigers are orange because they are perceived like as similar to green from animals that don't have tree white color.
Ah,
okay. There's a similar example in bigger animals and not just superheroes.
Yeah, exactly. But I thought it was so fascinating. And also you can see like here, the lower you go, the less need you have for eyes, because there is just nothing to see. It's so pitch dark. And this fish almost just doesn't have any eyes like this anymore. But
is this a fish that lights?
Yeah, exactly.
That's why it has small eyes, because it has light.
And that's a female.
It's actually this one. It attracts fish to its light, and they just wait there until the other small fish come and find the light, and then he eats them. So the light is not to see; it's to attract other
So lazy.
Yeah, so lazy.
It's inviting name of this fish that actually.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
laziest hunting.
And apparently, like the males see even worse than the females.
They're like 4 or 5 centimeters and they just attach to the female.
To the females,
mate.
they're just hanging out with the females, and and they're getting
They
all the
even
food.
become a
They're
part
like-
of the female.
Right.
Look at them.
Yeah. So this is like we've been using this facility here because what I've been learning more and more as a designer, it's so not satisfying. That's why I brought in the butterflies. It's not the same to see images as to see the actual things and textures and being able to touch things. And that's what we've been very lucky in the last 2 years. We've had, I will tell you more about this, but we've had a relationship with the biologists here, being able to research specimen and hold them. And I feel like as artists, we're so conditioned to our eyes, and we need to also be exploring with our hands and other senses. So that's what we've been doing here. Like these bird nests have been a part of our research project. I'm just going to point out a few things and then I will explain it more later. So the black sparrow, I recently learned, sees ultraviolet light that we don't. And it means that because they can always tell which berry is the sweetest. And it's because they get like this, this wax coat around the berries that are perfect. So it glows, like it's like a glow-in-the-dark effect. But we wouldn't see it, but they see it. And I'm going to show you, so because we did a design project where we tried to simulate this. I'm just realized, so like all the information is in Icelandic, but for example here, this is the snail. It sees like very blurry. It almost doesn't see anything, but it's enough. They just need to see like, there's the sky, there's the earth, and there might be some predator coming, but that's like enough information for them. So the idea was to have like the same object in the middle, but being able to see it with different eyes. So here you see how the black sparrow sees.
Yeah.
So so you press the green button and then you can see the ultraviolet. You see that you all have to bend down. It's because it's a design project for children. So we're in their eye level. So you have to work harder to get it. But I was telling you about the black sparrow that sees, you can see here how he sees the berries. So
quite easy.
Yeah. Okay. I will then do again what I did earlier. So before I took off the imaginary theater hat, and now I will put on the imaginary design hat. So now I am going to speak as the artistic director and founder of Thyggjó, which is a design collective, interdisciplinary design collective. And before I continue, Thyggjó means make-believe. It's the Icelandic word for when we're pretending, or for imaginary games of children. And that's very much kind of the heart of this project, because we are focusing on designing for children and their families, and we want to inspire curiosity, imaginative play, and free play, and kind of power of creativity. So this is the design collective. So this is the team. Again, as I was saying, this is very much the manifestation of, like, this company is in some ways built on what I learned in White Slumber, like the power of having people from different fields working together. And so you know me and what I do, I've already explained. But then I have Ninna on the team. She is a children's culture designer, and I was so excited when I first met her because I didn't know you could study to be a children's culture designer. She studied that in Stockholm and is a fantastic. She has taught me so many things about designing in eye level of children. Like you saw earlier when you were having to do this with the boxes we were looking at. It's very much like that's what she's so good at, making sure everything is their scale. And then we have Sibba, Sigurbjörg Stefánsdóttir. She's a fashion designer and a tailor. And then we have Erla Ólafsdóttir, who's an architect. And you see, like, we all have different tools on these images, and that's very much kind of representative of how I wanted to build this company up, is that everyone brings their different tool from their different design field, and then I always imagine that we have one toolbox all together, you know. So it's basically saying, like, when we are all together, we have more tools to work with. And first of all, I want to tell you, so actually I'm gonna backtrack because we've just been doing this tour, and they've been telling me a little bit about why you're here and what you want out of this trip. And I want to tell you something after learning that about Þykjó, is that like 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I was really struggling to get funding for this. I was trying a lot of different ways. It wasn't like we got one grant, and I was really, really close to stopping with Þykjó. Because I was like, okay, this is just not gonna turn into a viable field for me to be working in. I'm not able to pay them salary. And it's like a classic entrepreneurship moment when you're starting up a company. It's like exactly this, like after 1 or 2 years, which we had been, and then you have to push to find a way to make it sustainable. I understand you've been talking about sustainability, and this is a part of sustainable thinking, like how do you make your work sustainable for you? And we had to come up with a new way. So I had before knocked on the door of the biologists down here, you know, the exhibition that we were looking at, and said to them, I'm really interested in doing design projects for children that are inspired by biology and nature. And I want to go under the surface. Do you want to be my friends? And they said yes. And that was great. But we were still struggling, like how do we finance this adventure? And we came up with a model, and this is, I'm telling you this specifically now to encourage you to think of like new strategies. So we pitched to these cultural houses here. So it's like all part of the same company, you can say. So the Natural History Museum we were at, this library, and the museum next to it, and a music hall. So they are all working together. And they kind of wanted, and the new project manager for these cultural houses, they were really hungry for building imaginary bridges between these houses to encourage them to work together. And we were like, haha, that's what we love to do. Can we help out with that project? So we basically pitched an idea to be artists in residency. And I think if I didn't know musicians, because it's quite common as a musician to be, you know, a composer who is an artist in residency at some symphony orchestra for a year or something. And it's a brilliant model, but I haven't seen it done in other fields here in Iceland. So this was, gradually, we found a way to make this happen, finding a grant for this to make it happen. And I think it's just important to remember, like sometimes you just really have to find these new ways to finance yourself, to be able to do what you want to do, your projects. And you know, it's just like you have to sometimes throw in like 10 applications into like so many different fields and see, it's almost like fishing, you know, you don't know what's gonna catch. And this was our catch, and this has enabled us to be a viable company now. And it's only since last autumn we've been taking it in steps. And they were saying they also wanted me to talk a little bit about being a cultural entrepreneur. So now, because of these steps that we've been taking, this is like the first year where I'm only working in this. This has been kind of like a side baby alongside with theater, but then I took the leap last autumn to only work in Þykjó. And gradually, the other designers want to make it their first job. Okay, now we skip back. Okay. So first of all, I want to talk to you about a project called Shelters. You saw one downstairs. I pointed out to you there was a little girl sitting inside of, yeah. So the shelters we created was inspired by basically we had been facilitating workshops for children and families, and we created in the library like 3 years ago. I just threw together some kind of random cozy corner, but what it had was that there was some soundproofing, it was soft, and it enabled parents to sit with their child in privacy in a public space. And what I noticed was that everyone was so grateful. Everyone was so grateful that someone like us had created this space for them to have with their child. And it made me think a lot. And it made me think that this is exactly what most parents and children need today. Like everything is fast, and sometimes you just want to be able to go into a shell, which made me think about animals like conch shell and the turtle, that we are like these soft-bodied animals, but we don't have a shell. So I wanted to create that shell for us as humans. So this was very much a project we kind of kept being like, is it furniture? Is it an installation? And again, because it's always about like, how do you define yourself? It's like you encounter this question all the time, what would you call this? And I don't know, it's maybe something new. But recently I learned the word furnitecture, and I was like, aha, that's what it is. So now I can say, yes, it's furnitecture. And it's when you take furniture and architecture together. And this was very much like you saw when we were looking at the actual objects, and when we've been collaborating with the biologists here. One of the big tasks when you're doing this interdisciplinary collaboration is, how do you get someone to give you this information that you need? Because very often they're like, oh, you might not be interested in this, but you're like, no, yes, I am really, and you're trying to get it out. And what we found was the best thing was to go into the storage spaces where they keep, so they have this fantastic place where they just have thousands of shells, but they're like hidden away in drawers. And that's when the biologists started talking. And it was a big learning curve for me to be like, okay, like being like two grown-ups sitting at a table and being like, so tell me about biology is not very fruitful. But when you go and, you know, when you as an artist are with the biologist, with their artifacts, that's when it starts happening. And that's what worked for us. So for example here, when we had these conch shells that they were showing us, I have more photos afterwards, they started talking about, for example, this thing. This is on conch shells, so they don't sink into the sand. And they would have never told us this information randomly, but it started happening when we were just holding these different shells and being like, oh, this is so beautiful, what is this? And then you start getting these stories. And we were like, okay, it's perfect that we want to put something like this then here, so it gives it like a feeling of being grounded on the floor, so it doesn't sink, you know. And there were also things that we learned that really influenced our design thinking. Like, for example, they started talking about that the conch shell, it grows round and round, like in a spiral. And that influenced how this piece of furnitecture was built, that it was built actually round and round. And you can read into the age of seashells, of conch shells, by reading into these. It's like with trees, you know, the annual tree rings. You can tell the age of trees by these rings inside. It's the same with these. And this is the one that was downstairs that you saw. And this is inspired by sea urchins. Does everyone know what that is? Yeah. It was downstairs in the exhibition. We can see them later. But for example, so it's like when we're in deep time and when we get to, like one thing is to see and another thing is to really look and really kind of look 360 degrees. And when we had these objects and looked at them, we were looking at, there's like a lot of spikes. And that inspired the carpenter who worked with us. He started thinking about these, it's called Japanese joints. It's an ancient craft technique. So there's no screws in this. And so it's also like, this becomes a conversation between designers and craft makers, like what inspires the technique, that that kind of solutions can become because of research, scientific research. And this is the third shelter that we created, which is, as you probably can guess, inspired by the snail. And this was also part of, we interviewed children and families, grown-ups, because we wanted to see like what kind of position do you like to be in physically when you read? Because I am really tired of human beings always having to be in 90 degrees, like you are now. We're like in theater, everywhere, we're always like 90 degrees. And we wanted to facilitate different body postures. And that's why we really made sure that you could be on your stomach and read in this one. And you can just stop me and ask if there are any questions. But one of the main objectives here was to make something that would house both a parent and a child. And that was really important to us in the design, that it's primarily done for children, but it facilitates quality time for a parent with their child, inspired by this experience that I had. And because we were talking about sustainability, and environmental factors are really important to us in Þykjó. And this is, for example, we've been really researching materials that are sustainable and organic. And we found this fantastic company that takes leftover wool in Italy from the fashion design industry that would otherwise be thrown out, and they create new materials from it. And I also want to point out that we were kind of, with colors, it's like a very particular choice of like, why do you choose this color with that color, and what does it do? And for us, so the soft animal that's inside the seashell is actually often orange. So it was for us a way to kind of address what's soft on the inside and what's hard on the outside. And here you see, this is Luis Castillo Nasur, he's a sculptor and a builder, and I got to know him because he built a lot of sets that I had designed, and I really like his brain. He is one of those people who is many things, and we thought it was really important to bring him in very early into the design stage, so we wouldn't just like finish a design and be like, can you build this? He came in like super early with the first ideas. So it was his idea to have these Japanese joints that I was talking about, because he saw it early on that it could be useful. And that's again, so what I've been talking about in theater earlier, with just bringing people in early, that it's not too late, that it can really be integrated early. So we were artists in residency here during COVID. And COVID was also a part of why we became artists in residency, because they couldn't do events. And that's partly why I've been thinking about this long time, deep time, like COVID.
Can you maybe just explain what did it mean to be artist in residency here?
That's a great question. Yeah. So basically, being an artist in residency can mean many things in different circumstances, and it's always just, it's always basically a contract you make. So we had very clear what we wanted to do for them and what they could do for us. It was basically a contract like that. So for example, what they did for us, that we had weekly meetings with the biologists, and we had access to their artifacts, so we could look at the seashells, we could look at like everything, like we were granted access to things that are not normally accessible. And then we got space, which is like when you're starting a company, getting space, not having to pay rent can be a huge thing. And the museum next door, Gerðarsafn, they kind of were our main base camp, you can say. So we had an open design process there. We were designing there, and people could come in and see our process. And that was really important to us. So before making this one in full size, we first made it in this scale. And it created anticipation I realized that it was something that's not very often done with children, is to give them insight into the time it takes to create something, because often grown-ups are like, oh, they don't respect this beautiful chair or whatever it is. But if you don't learn about the value and like the time that has gone into something, it's maybe hard to give it meaning. And that's certainly what we learned here, was first just to invite them into the process and really thinking about the process as a part of the final result, if it means like publicly. So we were sharing our process on our social media, for example, and we had, because the only groups that were allowed into these houses were school children. So it was quite a special moment in history, in time, and these houses had emphasized children's culture before, making culture accessible to children, that it's free to come to events and exhibitions. But this made it like somehow extra important, because it was like maximum 10 people who could be at the museum at one time with 2-meter distance, but these were the only groups who could be just like together, like a class of children, which was fantastic for us. So it was sometimes like the stars align in the right way in the sky, and it was definitely like that for us. So for us, it was really important to get this feedback from them. They could see like, okay, they could understand about how you think in scale. How do artists and designers think in scale, that you don't just start making something full size before you understand it first, and you can make changes. And we were allowed to be a bit cheeky, and they thought it was a bit funny that we were allowed to stick tiny figures into these seashells, because we wanted to show them what we were thinking. And I mean, that's kind of the big task of a designer at all stages. You're always trying to mediate this image that you have in your head. And I feel when talking to children, this was particularly important, because it helped them to be like, yeah, what would it be like if I would shrink and be tiny and I could crawl into this seashell? So it was like, it's kind of finding these small games and getting their heads going. And we did workshops with them, as well, that helped us kind of getting their view on things. Any questions before I continue? I'm talking an awful lot. Any questions about this or thoughts? No? Okay. The other project that I want to tell you about is a costume project called Superheroes of the Earth. We dipped into it a little bit downstairs when we were talking about that there are some animals who can change, who become invisible by becoming white in the snow in the winter and brown in the summer. And we wanted to kind of make this accessible to kids by comparing it to being a superhero, that it's a superhero power. And we created this collection of costume. So this is a costume we call the Lovebird, and it's inspired by birds who have it in common to dance when they're in love. And we really looked at, so it's cranes and peacocks who have fantastic dance moves. So we were really looking at, in this design process, like what encourages kids to be moving and being silly and dancing, and kind of workshopping that with kids, having test groups who tried out prototypes and being like, okay, they think this is fun, let's do this. They think this is uncomfortable, let's change that. So it's always kind of what I find really sad with a lot, being a mother myself. I can see a lot of costumes and toys children have never tried them on. It's so obvious. You can so often see it doesn't work because they never got a chance to say anything about it. So that's been kind of our process, getting them in early and value their opinion. And we also created this as an installation because we wanted to encourage institutions to have costume playrooms, and that was here in the library for a long time and will be again. So it's also a question of making design and making art accessible, because we didn't want to create luxury products for rich children. We wanted to create something for public places where everyone can access them. So that's kind of our focus as a design collective, is to work with institutions that are accessible to children so everyone can enjoy it. So it's not focused on like a consumer, like a solo consumer. And this is another costume which is called the shell. And this was again, like, it was really interesting when we tested this with kids. When they had this on their back and they laid down, they were lying down for a really long time. And we were like, I was like, wow, okay, this is like super cozy. And then Erla, who is the architect on the team, who is also, she practices yoga and meditation. And she was like, of course, they're like opening their heart like station. I was like, oh, of course. And it's something you just don't learn about these things until you test them out. And it's so important to do it early. And we really emphasize, as I talked about with materials, we've been working with recycled materials and offcuts also in local textile industry. So we've been going, so inside these feet you saw on the bird costume, we have nets that would otherwise be thrown out. So it's about, like, rather than using plastic, very often when we go to talk to local producers, they're like, well, girls, it would just be so much easier if you would just make this in China. It would just be so much better if you just made it in China. And we're like, it wouldn't be better in the grand scheme of things. It's true, it would make, you know, we would be quicker and it would be easier, but like that's not our task today as designers. Like, we need to think about alternative ways that are not always the quick fix ways. Yeah, so we are collaborating with, we're trying to keep it local, that we have this relationship with local textile industries and we get the things that they would otherwise throw out. How are we on time, Doro? Korter? Okay. So I've shown you a little bit with furniture, costume design. Now I want to talk about a project that's related to the lovebird, and it came out of that, which is the Muse eggs. So we were working with a collection of eggs, and again, made it accessible to kids. And I love this photo because I think it's really important when you're exhibiting something for kids that they're not always looking like this or like this, but sometimes they want to look like this. It's just like thinking about different levels. And I think it applies in theater as well. I have a friend, and she's saying like, why are we so obsessed with making theater shows? And we're always just thinking about, for how long can children sit still? She's like, it's fascist. Why are we just thinking about like, no, it can't be longer than 30 minutes because they have to sit still and they cannot sit still for longer than 30 minutes. And I think this is just when we're working for children, it's just like thinking a little bit 360 degrees and not kind of fixating on like how they should sit and stand, like meeting them at different levels, both as audience members and just like as museum guests. And as you can see, so we were really looking at the shape of eggs. These are seabird eggs. And what I thought was fascinating is that they have this, you see how they're not like the normal round, they're not like the Easter eggs that we have.
On the up, they're more focused downwards. Is it for better balance or something?
Well, there's a lot of different theories. One of the theories that I thought was fascinating is because they're on the cliffs, you know, the seabirds have nests on the cliffs. And when,
better centers of gravity.
yeah, and so it means rather than rolling off the cliff, they roll in a circle. So it's like, and we're always saying like, so this, and then some scientists say like, no, that's not the reason. This is one of the theories, but it's just, I think it's been very interesting as a designer to look at how nature designs things. It's really fascinating. So we were looking with these eggs, both at the shapes and textures, and we collaborated with Sóley Stefánsdóttir, musician, and she really delved into the world of bird songs. So she was she was with us in the residency here, and she got access to bird songs, just files that she then took and played with. So she would cut down, so maybe she would get like a song of one sparrow, but she would like isolate different sounds, and then in collaboration with us, we would program these sounds into the eggs so you could play them. So when you touch certain points on the eggs, you get a sound. And the idea was to both create a new instrument that is not conditioned to kind of going to music school, just like as a first impression of music, kind of making it a bit more open. And this would introduce things like octaves. You have low sounds and you have high sounds and you have different rhythms. So this has been a really, really exciting collaboration with Sóley. And this is Edda Elísabet Magnúsdóttir, who is a biologist we've worked with a lot. And she specializes in whale songs. She's been a key researcher in how whales sing in Iceland. So basically before she did her study in 2011, we thought that whales around Iceland didn't sing. We thought they only sung in the Caribbean. And then she made this discovery, and it's quite fascinating because she recorded the hit song. So whales compose music as well. So it works, and you can see. So she's always showing us and kids on her computer how they're structured, and they're basically structured like our songs. Whales have verses, they repeat verses. You can really see it's like a similar composition technique, like stuff that we think we are only good at, you know. And so she proved in her research that there's like one song that becomes very popular. There's like the whale composer that makes the hit of 2011, and then all the other whales sing the same song. But then next year you have a new song. So it's almost like having like, you know, the hit song on the radio, like 1 year. And I just thought this was so fascinating. So we've continued to work with her because she's doing very original research work, and she's passionate about mediating it to children. So that's been our
collaboration. Are there any characteristics that whales tend to like? Like in human music, when it becomes popular, it usually has some particular qualities. Is this the same with whales?
That's a really good question. I'm not sure. But there are definitely things that, you know, some singers are more lucky in finding their female friend, you know. So there is something in their song that attracts. But I don't know what it is. But it's the kind of question, you know, that would get a meeting with a biologist. And I just want to show you like a short example of how they've been working with children. So this is from we did a little tour in the Westfjords, like northwest of Iceland, with a show that was inspired by all of this basically dialogue and research we've been doing together about music in the animal kingdom. And it's one of those moments where I was like, oh, okay, it's maybe like full circle now, like, you know, going a little bit back into creating performances for children like this. And one of the last things I want to show you, because we were looking at the bird nests downstairs, and what I've been talking about a lot here is that we shouldn't be kind of only looking at images on screens as designers and artists. We should really kind of, that's what we see and what we learn through working with children is how they experience with their hands, through touch, being like tactile and getting information like that. And we started thinking it's a little bit like practice what you preach. You know, if you're always trying to get children to experience with many senses, you also have to do it as a designer. And that's why we decided to really work with these biologists here. And after creating all of these eggs and the bird costumes, we thought like, okay, wouldn't it be nice, like where do eggs live in a nest? So we wanted to create nests that, you know, this is also similar to the shelters. This is really like furniture design with similar aims. And when we started thinking about who in Iceland would be the best to weave nests, like where is the local craftsmanship, we immediately thought of the Blindravinnustofan, which has, it facilitates work for people who are visually impaired or legally blind. And this is one of the projects that I have learned the most from, because as a designer, when you cannot show someone a sketch, it makes you go out of your comfort zone. So it was really crucial for us when we started working with them, and especially with Danny, who you can see here. He's been weaving basically baskets for infants for 30 years. So he is amazing. He's like one of the quickest, like once he starts, you know, he's such a skilled craftsman. But we had to take actual bird nests from the biologists here and just feel our way with him and be like, okay, Danny, can you put your hand here and feel this curve? We're really interested in this shape. Can we try to make that on a big scale? So it was kind of forcing us as designers to go out of the, like, making a 3D model in the computer and sending with email. Like, we had to find new ways. And I was really pleased with the result. And it meant that both us as designers and him as a craftsman, we both had to go out of our comfort zones, because his main problem was like, or our luxury problem was that he's so good. He makes everything almost too perfect. And we wanted it to be kind of organic and not just like a perfect circle. And there was a moment where he was like, do you just want me to do it like I'm the devil itself? And we were like, yes, that's what we want. Can you do that? And it was just like a lot of, you know, nudging, like people going out of their comfort zone, trying to find, but the result was something that was very new to both of us, which were these bird nests. And what I really like, it's irresistible when you're in them or next to them. You just start stroking them. It's like, it's so satisfying, and the whole focus went into that as well. And these were reworked quite recently, and I think it was quite interesting because at the beginning we didn't have any colors. It was very like unlike a lot of our previous work, and I think it's because we were kind of almost shutting down the eyes. All the effort went into the form and the language of like the hands, like the shapes. So the colors came in a lot later when we got some distance from the work, and we were like, why didn't we put any colors in? And I think it's just because of this. We were kind of shutting out one sense for this project. And this project we saw downstairs. I want to just very briefly, so I've told you about it, I'm not gonna repeat myself, but like the core essence of this was how do we see the world in a different way from other animal species, which is, and it was quite interesting to have this conversation in collaboration with the biologists, because they were saying this research is also new to us. This is not what they do every day. So it was also pushing them to read new articles, and because it's a very recent research field, like it's hard to tell how another animal sees the world, but we can guess based on some evidence. So this was like a really interesting research field for both of us. And I just want to show you a little bit about the work process behind this, because last year we founded Krakkaráð Þykjó, which means the Kids Consult Panel of Þykjó, which is kind of an umbrella term for all our collaboration and conversation with children throughout the design process. And Ninna, who I told you about, the children's culture designer, it was her idea to make a logo. And she said, no one, like the grown-ups won't take them seriously until they have a logo. And I thought it was brilliant. And it's true, because when we are collaborating with like institutions, everyone wants to have their logo like on the flyer or on the advertisement. And we're like, well, you know, these are as important collaborators, so we're gonna have their logo on as well. And it's kind of a part of how we want to give more power and agency to kids, that we always say, like, kids are the best experts in being kids, and we value their opinion as much as, you know, biologists who have 3 degrees in university, because no one knows better how it is to be a kid today than kids today. It's not the same, even though we remember the feeling of how it was to be a kid. It's just not the same as being a kid now in this world, in this day. So that's really important to us. And it speaks to the article of the Convention of the Child, which is super important to us. And it has been confirmed in our parliament. I don't know, probably in Bulgaria as well. It's an international contract. And it states that, first of all, it's a human right for kids to play. At the same time, a lot of people are saying that it should be on the list of endangered things, because with more screens and just like challenges in modern time, free play is actually in danger. And just, you know, and that is why we started all of this. Like having costumes that kind of make you go into a fantasy play rather than being on your iPad and putting costumes, you know, on a character on your iPad. It's different to learn it through your body. So this is super important to kind of the core of our company and everything we do. And I just want to say, like, in this project, it was, we wanted to get their feedback, like we call it, to see through their eyes and to hear with their ears. So as I was showing you things downstairs, so rather than me having, you know, the grown-up meeting with the biologist where we talk in a room, I want to have the meeting with kids. So that's what I've learned, you know, with this interdisciplinary collaboration that's designed for children, is I want them in the room when I'm talking to the other specialists. Because when this biologist is telling kids something, I can immediately see, okay, this is what gets them going. They're not so interested in this. And it just heightens my awareness as a designer. So this is something that we are practicing more and more in our work. I wanted to show you this, but I think we're out of time. Yeah. And I think also, like, everyone's head is probably full. You've been talked to a lot. But I just want to point out, we did this installation. There is, made all of these fancy slides, but I can show you this trailer. I think that will be the last thing. I'm just going to show you the trailer and encourage you, if you want to go tomorrow morning to Harpa, it's in Harpa Music Hall, you can go and check it out. But before we do that, that will be my last point today. Are there any questions or any kind of anything you're curious to know more about out of the things I've been saying?
What was the opinion of the parents of that kids?
You mean like with the design products?
Yeah, do they like it? Do they?
Yeah, it's a really good question.
Skeptic?
No, we haven't had, sometimes sometimes when we have specialists and we're saying like, no, but we have to bring kids in first before we decide anything. We have to get a workshop with kids before we go further. And sometimes they're skeptic of that it will be meaningful, that children will actually have something to bring to the table. For example, we've been asked to design a playground, and the guy I was talking to, he was like, well, I mean, if you ask a kid what he wants for, they will just say a swing and a slide. And I was like, well, have you asked them? Have you tried? And also it matters how you ask and how you get this information. And that's why it's important to have someone like our children's culture designer who knows how to create an environment for them to share their opinion through play. And so I feel like it's maybe been more skepticism with that, but most like the luxury problems that we hear about, for example, with this installation that I'm going to show you, is that I hear from kids from parents who say, yeah, we were just going to go in there for 15 minutes, but we ended up being for 1.5 hours and they didn't want to go out. And I was like, well, then I am happy. Yeah, and a lot of people talk about this, just like this calmness. I feel like both with being able to facilitate free play and being curious, and but also just to be able to sit down with your child and read a book in a public place somehow in a different setting has been a feedback we've gotten a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How you choose the words for your logo? The right word.
You mean for the company? It's a really good question. For me, this just came pretty quickly. I did think about it a lot, though. It's a good question because, as you saw, it has this Icelandic letter thought at the beginning, and we knew that would be a problem. So it always, when we write our website, it's TH. It's all kinds of problems, but we decided to stick with it because it sums up kind of the core of what is important to us. And it's also important that it looks graphically good, that it's so I did get an opinion from a graphic designer, just like how, does it pop out, just like how do the letters kind of work together.
Everything is important.
Everything is important, exactly. And it's, as you know, in theater, everything is information. And
how it sounds, how it looks.
Yeah, what it means. Yeah, and it's always, and everything has to be a choice. Or a mixture of gut feeling and, rationalized choice. And for me, like Thigyo, the name was kind of very much a gut feeling thing.
What it means?
It means like make-believe. So it's about the imagination, basically, being able to imagine things and pretending, which I think is very important. Yeah. Any other questions? No? Are you ready to go to the Sky Lagoon? I think so. I think you need to soak and just be able to think about everything, all the lectures you've been given, right?
It's quite inspiring, everything that we hear, and it's really our heads are exploding. Yeah. Because a lot of ideas come and we want to steal a lot of things in the way of thinking. Yeah. And exactly. It's very enrichment, and we thank you a lot.
Okay, that's great to hear. And also sometimes, I at least have a question one day later. If there is something, feel free to just send through Doro if you have a question for me or advice or something. It doesn't come always immediately. I would be happy if there's anything I can.
Thank you so much.
And also just think about, especially I think it's important to just use, there's so much European funding and all kinds, it's just exploring if you want to start up your own things. Just not, it's the same with it's the same secret trick as with collaborators. If the trick to getting grant money is to apply for it. It's and just answering what they ask you, I'm gonna end with this trailer. It's 2 minutes of this project in Harpa, and that will be my final.
Hljóðhimnar is placed in the heart of Harpa Music and Conference Hall. Hljóðhimnar is a permanent installation for children and families an invitation to experience the vast world of music and sound. The design of the space is inspired by the magical journey of a sound wave passing through different parts of our ear. We start in the outer ear, where children can conduct the Iceland Symphony Orchestra. The ear canal is the first pit stop of the sound wave. Here we tune into the music of the animal kingdom through a collection of instruments called animelodies. We continue on our journey of the sound wave to the middle ear, where we can snuggle up to lullabies sung by the Icelandic opera. The inner ear is the final destination of the sound wave, entering through the oval window. There we can retreat into the cochlea for a moment of silence. Reykjavík Big Band introduces us to rhythm patterns. The operator allows for phone calls abroad to explore singing in different languages.
I have often walked down this street before.
The stereo wheel of the Reykjavík Big Band allows us to sail the oceans of music, traveling from Latin swing to New Orleans jazz. We welcome you to come aboard and visit Hljóðhimnar at Harpa.